As I said in my opening remarks, this virtual commodity has real-world impact. We don't know the total scope of the environmental effects of crypto mining. And the White House Office of Science and Technology has specifically called for more information, but they don't have the authority to call for it, which is why the Crypto Asset Environmental Transparency Act is so important. Mr. Altenberg, do you agree that this legislation would provide more transparency and disclosure, which could help us to oversee and understand the environmental impacts of crypto mining? It's almost alone in the entire American economy, kind of sealed off from the knowledge, the information, which everyone should have about the environmental impacts of the industry.
And in Pennsylvania, we have an environmental rights amendment to our Constitution that guarantees the public actually the ownership of their public natural resources. One of the big things we're seeing with cryptocurrency and the lack of transparency is the public does not know where these facilities are coming in. They do not know where they're using the power. They do not know where the power is being used. They do not know where the pollution is. As long as we have that, the state is not in a position where they're going to be able to effectively regulate these facilities.
Yeah, when I was growing up in Ward 2 in Malden, Malden is a city about 4 miles north of Boston. My grandfather got off the boat, from Ireland, worked on the Malden River, and I'm growing up 3 blocks from there. And my mother, when I was about 10, again, much more intelligent than I am, she would just say, Eddie, whatever you do, don't swim in the Malden River, because it was kind of black with a pre-Jimi Hendrix purple haze. Because all the industries use the Malden River as the dumping ground. The coal industry, every Converse All-Star was made in my home water, 8,000 people just using the Malden River. So it was, obviously an era where there really weren't a lot of regulations, but there was a kind of a black cloud over our neighborhood. Growing up. Now, the other side of town, they didn't have a black cow. That's where, other people lived. But in my home ward, kind of the working class ward, and every city has a ward like that. So my goal here is just to provide the transparency, the disclosure that could help us to oversee and understand the environmental impacts of crypto mining. So, Dr. Kellis, is that an unreasonable thing to ask, that people just understand what the impacts are?
Absolutely not an unreasonable thing to ask. We can't improve our environment if we don't know how it's being used and we don't know what's happening around us. I'll give you perfect examples. One, we're now aware of the coal piles that were being used for providing energy, the coal piles that are left over and sitting on the riverbank edges in Pennsylvania. And so now, because of the fact that that made it into the news, otherwise we would not have known, we're having an honest conversation about it. And the proponents would say that, it's better to burn it than let it sit there and have the pollutants like the mercury leak into the waterways. But I would ask in that conversation, which is better, that it pollutes the water or pollutes the air? If we don't have transparency and we don't have disclosure, we can't have an honest conversation about that. And neither one of those pollutions are what we're looking for. And of course, burning it, then we end up with the ash. So that is another pollutant. And just like, it was a great analogy, just like with coffee, running water over coffee grounds like the ash leaches far more coffee, or in this case, mercury, out than if you ran water over whole coffee beans, which is the actual unburnt coal. So which one is worse? But again, we can have that honest conversation, but we can't if we don't have the disclosure and we don't have the transparency.
Okay, so again, you make the case for more transparency because you can't manage what you don't measure. But unfortunately, we do know that harms are being felt now by families across the country. I've received testimony from 12 states, from Georgia to Washington State, about the damage that crypto mining is already doing in their communities. And I would just ask unanimous consent that this testimony be included in the record. Without objection. So ordered. We're joined by Senator Lummis from Wyoming, and let's turn and recognize you, Senator.